That's the fatsa we have to put up with. The cruel words hurled by my own daughter, Jasmine, echoed through the opulent ballroom, silencing the string quartet and freezing 200 guests in place. All eyes like shards of ice turned to me. There I stood, Eleanor Baines, Ellie to the few who knew me, a 66-year-old ghost in a wine-colored dress from a thrift store, clutching a cheaply wrapped gift in my work-roughened hands. The Grand Metropolitan Ballroom in Charlotte, North Carolina, erupted in a wave of condescending laughter. I felt the heat of 1,000 suns blaze across my cheeks, my very soul shrinking under the weight of their collective scorn. I was the stray animal, the unfortunate stain on their perfect, elegant evening. But then a shift in the atmosphere. Mr. Sterling, the groom's father, a titan of industry in a bespoke suit that cost more than my first car, suddenly stopped chuckling. His face, a moment ago alight with cruel mirth, drained of all color. His eyes, sharp and calculating, locked onto my face with a look of dawning, earth-shattering horror. "Wait," he murmured, the single word cutting through the noise like a blade. He took a hesitant step forward, then another, his entire world visibly tilting on its axis. "Aren't you my new boss?" For 3 decades I had been invisible. After my husband's tragic death, when Jasmine was just a girl, I became a phantom in my own life. I was the woman who haunted office buildings in the pre-dawn gloom, my hands smelling of bleach and my shoes squeaking a lonely rhythm across polished granite floors. I rode 3 separate transit lines daily, my existence a symphony of quiet sacrifice. Jasmine grew to despise the scent of struggle that clung to me. She was ashamed of my humility, my thrift store wardrobe, my life of whispered calculations. What she never knew, what no one could have possibly imagined, was that while I scrubbed and polished, I was also absorbing. In the silence of those empty corporate towers, I became a silent scholar of ambition. I listened to the late-night confessions of executives, their boasts of triumphs, their frantic whispers of failures and financial secrets. With the few dollars I painstakingly saved, I began to invest. My modest apartment became a secret war room, stacked with rescued financial journals and dog-eared economics textbooks. While my body ached with fatigue, my mind was a forge, burning with relentless determination. Beneath the facade of a failed, pathetic woman, I was secretly building an empire. My investments, started with a mere $50 on a whispered tip, blossomed. I acquired properties under anonymous corporate veils. I snatched up shares in dying companies and willed them back to life with my shrewdness. For 20 years, I wore the mask of poverty, my bank account swelling to a fortune that would defy belief. And now, the mask was crumbling. Mr. Sterling was the man whose lifeblood, his company, I had quietly purchased for a cool $45 million just 2 weeks prior. He had signed the papers, never knowing that the enigmatic, powerful E.J. Beaumont was the very woman his family now mocked. I watched the devastating realization crash over him. The memory of my face on video conferences, my signature on the contracts, my calm voice during negotiations, it all clicked into a terrifying, perfect picture. The sneers around us began to die, replaced by a bewildered hush that spread outwards in nervous ripples. Jasmine, her cruel smile faltering, rushed over. "What are you talking about, Mr. Sterling?" she asked, her voice a saccharine dagger. "This is just my mother, Eleanor." "The one who cleans buildings?" She laughed, a brittle, nervous sound, but her eyes were wide with panic. My heart hammered a wild, triumphant rhythm against my ribs. For 2 decades, I had guarded my double life with the precision of a master spy. I operated through a labyrinth of shell companies and offshore accounts, a fortress of finance so complex it was utterly untraceable. Mr. Sterling's company, drowning in $3 million of debt and lawsuits, had been my latest conquest. His hands trembled as he fumbled for his phone, his screen glowing with damning evidence. "My God," he whispered, and the confession was a thunderclap in the silent room. You are the one who bought Sterling Corporation. I, Ellie, the invisible, the fat Sa, stood my ground. The small, pathetic gift in my hands felt suddenly weightless. The air crackled with impending reckoning. After decades of silence, the empress of her own shadow empire was finally ready to speak. When my legal team first presented the sinking ship of Sterling Corporation, I saw more than just bleeding balance sheets and crippling debt. I saw decades of honest labor, the loyal employees with families to feed, all teetering on the brink because of one man's well-intentioned but catastrophic mismanagement. The $45 million wasn't a purchase. It was a rescue mission. It was the price of saving hundreds of lives from financial ruin. "Mr. Sterling, you're scaring me," Jasmine insisted. But the razor-sharp edge of her arrogance was gone, replaced by a thread of panic. "What does my mother have to do with your company?" Her new husband, Devon, moved to her side, a handsome young man sculpted by comfort, nervously adjusting his tie. He had inherited his father's gentle eyes, but not his brutal bottom-line pragmatism. Mr. Sterling never broke his gaze from mine. The scorn that had been there moments before had evaporated, replaced by a stark, humbling respect. "Miss Beaumont," he said, his voice resonating through the hushed ballroom as he used my corporate alias. The name landed not as a correction, but as a coronation. "I want to personally thank you for saving my family's company. Without your intervention, hundreds of people would have been handed their pink slips this very week." The silence that descended was absolute, a physical weight pressing down on everyone. Jasmine stood frozen, her perfectly painted mouth agape as she tried to reassemble her shattered reality. "Miss Beaumont," she repeated, the name a foreign poison on her tongue. "My mother is Baines." Her voice climbed, a shrill note that drew the circling guests closer, a pack of vultures drawn to the scent of a scandal, and still I held my silence. For 30 years, I had mastered the art of invisibility, of letting the noise of others fill the void. But now, every second of my quiet was a deliberate, calculated weapon, dissolving the perfect, glittering facade of her wedding day. I could see the frantic reel of memories playing behind her eyes, every sneer at my thrift store cardigans, every lie to her friends about my consulting work, every time she had treated my existence as an inconvenience. "Mom?" she finally whispered, the words sounding alien and fragile after her public evisceration. "Is what Mr. Sterling is saying true?" Her eyes were a turbulent storm of confusion, a flicker of desperate hope, and something darker, more insidious, the unmistakable glint of greed. I could almost hear the frantic calculations whirring behind her brow, tallying the possibilities, the luxury, the power. Mr. Sterling extended his hand, a gesture of deference that felt like the world tilting on its axis. "Allow me to introduce you properly," he announced to the captivated audience. "This is Eleanor Baines, the visionary who saved my company and the livelihoods of 600 people." The moment had arrived. The spotlight I had spent a lifetime avoiding was now mine. I felt the eyes of the entire room upon me. A collective breath held. When I finally spoke, my voice was soft, yet it carried to every corner of the opulent hall. "Mr. Sterling," I began, "I appreciate your words, but there seems to be a misunderstanding." A wave of visible relief washed over Jasmine. She thought I was about to deny it all, to retreat back into the safe, pathetic narrative she had built for me. "I didn't buy your company to be recognized or thanked," I continued, my gaze shifting slowly, deliberately, to lock with my daughter's. "I did it because it was the right thing to do." I paused, letting the weight of the words settle. "It's a principle I learned from observing a world filled with so much unnecessary suffering." Jasmine blinked, utterly bewildered. I had neither confirmed nor denied a thing. Instead, I had planted a seed, a tiny, torturous seed of doubt that I knew would fester and grow in the fertile soil of her shame and avarice. And I, Ellie the Invisible, allowed a small, knowing smile to touch my lips for the first time all evening. The game, I knew, had only just begun. That seed of doubt blossomed into a raging inferno in Jasmine's mind. In the days following the wedding, my phone became a relentless beacon of her anxiety. First came the saccharine messages, dripping with feigned concern. "Mommy, are you okay? You seem so overwhelmed at the wedding." Then the carefully casual probes. "You never mentioned knowing the Sterlings before. Their business is fascinating, isn't it?" Finally, the raw, unvarnished desperation. "I need you to tell me the truth about what Mr. Sterling said." I deserve to know. I maintained my ghostly routine as if nothing had changed. Each morning at 5 a.m., I rose in my small working-class apartment. I drank my black coffee and ate my plain toast. I pulled on my cleaning uniform, a costume of invisibility, and boarded the 3 separate buses that carried me to the gleaming corporate towers. But what Jasmine couldn't see was that during those early morning rides, on a sleek, encrypted phone she never knew existed, I was quietly directing a vast $200 million empire sprawled across the continent. On Tuesday night, she could bear the suspense no longer. Jasmine showed up at my apartment unannounced. I heard her fumbling with the building's ancient lock, a string of muffled curses drifting up the stairwell. When she finally stood at my door, she was a vision of misplaced opulence, wrapped in an ivory cashmere coat that cost more than 6 months of my rent. Her designer shoes looked profoundly alien against the worn linoleum of my hallway. "Mom," she announced, sweeping past to me and perching uncomfortably on my thrift store sofa, her eyes scanning the humble space with familiar disdain. "We have to talk. I can't stop thinking about the wedding. Mr. Sterling, he looked at you differently, like he actually respected you." She was hunting for the truth, but she was still looking in all the wrong places, and I had no intention of making the hunt easy. I poured myself a cup of simple chamomile tea and settled into my favorite armchair, the one I'd rescued from a curb 15 years ago and reupholstered, with stubborn hands and bargain bin fabric. I sat across from the daughter who saw my life as a collection of failures. "Your wedding was beautiful, Jasmine," I said, my voice a placid lake. "Devin seems like a good man." Inside, a hurricane of emotions raged. This was the first voluntary visit in years, and its motivation, suspected wealth, was a bitter pill to swallow. "Don't change the subject," she burst out, springing from the sofa as if electrocuted. "Mr. Sterling said you are Beaumont. He said you bought his company for millions of dollars. Is it true or not?" Her voice fractured on the last word, laying bare the desperate hope she had carried for days. I took a slow, deliberate sip of my tea, feeling its warmth ground me. "Jasmine," I said softly, meeting her frantic gaze, "look at me. Do you truly believe that I, a woman who scrubs toilets for a living, who wears discount store clothes, who calls this tiny apartment home, could be a millionaire?" I stood and held out my hands, palms up, like an offering of truth. They were a map of my struggle, calloused, rough, with short, practical nails. These hands have scrubbed thousands of floors. Do they look like the hands of a CEO? But a dangerous spark, one that wouldn't be easily extinguished, flickered in her eyes. It was the stubborn flame of avarice. "Then explain why Mr. Sterling called you Miss Beaumont," she demanded, her voice tight. "Explain why he looked at you as if you held the sun in your hands." It was time to feed the beast of her suspicion, just enough to make it hungrier. I let a thoughtful silence hang in the air between us. "Perhaps," I said, each word measured and slow, "Mr. Sterling confused me with someone else." I paused, a dramatic beat that made her lean in infinitesimally. Or maybe I simply have a face that reminded him of someone from his business past. Men of his age and pressure, they sometimes see ghosts where there are none. It wasn't a lie, but it was a masterfully crafted half-truth, and Jasmine, with her paranoid mind and heart poisoned by greed, eagerly filled the empty spaces with her own wild speculations. I watched the internal calculus play out on her face, the fear, the hope, the avaricious wonder. But what if he wasn't confused? She murmured more to herself than to me. "What if you really have money hidden somewhere?" In the days that followed, my daughter transformed into a relentless amateur detective. She began appearing at my door at strange hours, her eyes perpetually scanning my humble surroundings, searching for a crack in the facade. One afternoon I found her fingers skimming over the papers on my desk. "I was just looking for a pen," she lied, her cheeks flushing. But I knew the truth. She had been hunting for a secret that wasn't there. All my important documents rested in a safety deposit box at the city's most exclusive, most discreet private bank. My apartment contained only the artifacts of the life she believed I lived. Utility bills, grocery receipts, old magazines. Yet I had sown a few deliberate, false trails. A bank deposit slip for $300 with a smudged digit that could be misread as a much larger sum. A scribbled phone number that belonged to a local pizzeria, but to an eager eye could seem like a corporate line. Let her chase shadows. On Friday, she arrived with Devon in tow. It was the first time my son-in-law had ever crossed my threshold, and his discomfort was palpable. He was a kind young man, soft-edged by a life of abundance, and he looked as if he wished to be anywhere else. "Miss Baines," Devon began with the polite formality of his upbringing. "Jasmine has told me about the confusion at our wedding. My father hasn't been himself since. He keeps insisting that you look familiar to him in a professional context." Jasmine sat on the edge of the sofa, her eyes like searchlights, scouring the room for hidden evidence. "Devon thinks we should clear up this misunderstanding," she said, though her tone screamed that she wanted only confirmation, not clarity. "What kind of clarification?" I asked, my voice a mask of neutral curiosity. Inside, I felt like a grandmaster in a game of chess, every move calculated to guide my opponent exactly where I wanted her. Devon cleared his throat, uncomfortable. "Well, my father mentioned the company was bought by a woman named E.J. Beaumont. We thought, perhaps you know this person? Or maybe—" He hesitated, floundering. "Maybe there's some family connection we weren't aware of." Jasmine leaned forward, her body taut with anticipation. This was her moment. "Baines is a very common name," I said simply, a gentle deflection. "But if Mr. Sterling truly wishes to meet the person who bought his company, I'm sure he can contact his lawyers to arrange an introduction." I allowed a faint, perplexed smile. "Though I don't understand why he'd personally thank someone for a simple business transaction." Jasmine practically leaped from the couch. "Because she saved hundreds of jobs. Because she paid more than the company was worth. It was an act of generosity, not just business." Her outburst was a confession. She had been investigating, pressuring Devon for the financial details, and in her fervor, she had revealed she knew the transaction's charitable nature. She had been assembling the puzzle, piece by piece. Now, she only needed my final piece to complete the picture. I had no intention of giving it to her. Instead, I sat back in my old chair, sipped my cheap tea, and looked at my daughter with the serene expression of a woman who had nothing to hide. And for the first time since the wedding, I saw genuine, unadulterated fear in her eyes. Fear of being wrong, but a far more potent fear of being right. The fear in Jasmine's eyes soon curdled into a pure, unshakable obsession. Her visits became a siege, more frequent, more invasive. She arrived at dawn with pastries and late at night with flimsy excuses, her eyes constantly inventorying my possessions. "Mom, have you ever thought about moving to a nicer place?" she would ask, her voice dripping with a newfound saccharine concern. "Wouldn't you love to have a little car instead of relying on those dreadful buses?" Her eyes were relentless scanners, sweeping over my apartment again and again, searching for a single crack in the fortress of poverty she had always known. The hunt was consuming her. One Wednesday evening, as I trudged home beneath a bruised, rainy sky, I found her perched on the building's front steps. She was a vision of misplaced luxury, huddled in the downpour, her designer coat soaked through, and her mascara bleeding in dark trails down her cheeks. She had been waiting for 3 hours. "I need the truth," she pleaded, her voice splintering as I approached. "Devon thinks I'm losing my mind. His family looks at me like I'm some kind of hysteric. But I know something doesn't add up, Mom. I feel it in my bones." I led my shivering daughter upstairs and made her a strong hot tea. She trembled on my thrift store sofa, and for the first time in years, I saw not calculated manipulation but raw, genuine vulnerability. "Tell me what you've been thinking," I said, settling into the chair across from her, just as I had when she was small and haunted by nightmares. "I hired someone," she confessed, her gaze fixed on the steam rising from her cup. "A private investigator. To find E.J. Beaumont." My heart gave a single, hard knock against my ribs, but my face remained a placid mask. "And what did he find?" I asked with genuine curiosity. I had, after all, spent a fortune to ensure the answer was nothing. "Nothing," Jasmine whispered, the word thick with frustration. "It's like Beaumont is a ghost. A corporation of smoke and mirrors. She has entities in a dozen countries, but no public photos, no interviews, no signature. Her lawyers handle everything through intermediaries. The detective said in 30 years he'd never seen anyone so meticulously erased." I leaned forward, a picture of mild intrigue. "And that makes you suspicious of me?" Jasmine looked up, her eyes raw. "Mom, you were there, in those offices at night. You were there when they made their deals, when they left confidential documents on their desks. Did you never learn anything you could have used?" It was a sharp, shrewd question, closer to the heart of the truth than she could possibly imagine. "Jasmine," I said softly, "if I had learned corporate secrets while pushing a mop, don't you think I would have improved our lives long ago? Don't you think you would have had more than this when you were a child?" But she shook her head, a violent, desperate motion. "Maybe you didn't want anyone to suspect. Maybe it was safer to play the pauper while you secretly built a kingdom." Her voice rose, fraying at the edges. "Mr. Sterling keeps asking about you. He says your face is burned into his memory from the acquisition calls. Devin is starting to ask questions about our family history, about where we really came from." I stood and walked to the kitchen, needing a moment to steady myself. The fact that a professional had found nothing was a triumph, but it also meant her obsession was now backed by professional failure. She would never let this go. When I returned, she was at my bookshelf, her fingers tracing the cracked spines of my used finance books, the silent soldiers in my secret war. "Why do you have all these?" she demanded, pulling a dog-eared market analysis manual I'd bought for $1. "Since when does a cleaning woman need to understand high finance?" Her tone was an accusation. She held the book as if it were a murder weapon. "I buy them because they're cheap and I like to read," I said, a partial truth tasting like ash. "And after years of overhearing business conversations, I suppose I developed a curiosity about how the machine actually works." It wasn't a lie. It just wasn't the confession she craved. Jasmine dropped the book and turned to me, her eyes pools of pure desperation. "Mom, if you have money, if you have any money saved, I need you to tell me. Devin and I were in trouble." This was new, a crack in her perfect facade. "What kind of trouble?" I asked, layering my voice with maternal concern. Jasmine collapsed back onto the sofa, the truth tumbling out in a weary torrent. The company was worse off than they admitted before the wedding. Even after the sale, there are massive personal guarantees. Our house is mortgaged to the hilt. The cars, my jewelry, it was all bought on credit, betting the company's income would never stop. There it was, the confession I had been waiting for. "How much?" I asked gently. She covered her face with her hands, her voice muffled. $200,000 on credit cards, $300,000 on the house, another $100 in personal loans. And that's not even counting the wedding. We put the entire thing on credit thinking we could pay it off later. $600,000. A sum that was a rounding error in my world, but for them a life sentence of financial ruin. "And what are you planning to do?" I asked, though I already knew the destination of this painful journey. "Mr. Sterling is trying to find a job, but at his age..." She trailed off. "Devin is looking, but his entire resume is the family business." And she bit her lip, a childhood tale. I thought, maybe if you really have money hidden, you could help us. Not as a gift, as a loan. We'd pay you back with interest. The moment had arrived. The hunter had become the supplicant. She had laid all her cards on the table, revealing a hand of desperation and debt. But instead of giving her the yes or no she craved, I decided to give her something far more potent and torturous. I gave her a mirror. "Jasmine," I said, my voice soft as velvet yet sharp as a scalpel, "let's pretend for a moment that I do have that kind of money. Do you truly believe, after you called me a fat sow in front of 200 people, after all the years of scorn and shame, that the woman you see before you would be someone you could just come to and beg from?" The silence in the room was absolute. I let the question hang there, let the weight of every sneer, every condescending remark, every time she had pretended I didn't exist, settle upon her like a shroud. Do you really think a woman with the power to buy and sell futures would have silently endured a lifetime of your contempt? The hope in her eyes didn't die. It twisted into something new, a horrifying, dawning comprehension of the chasm she had carved between us with her own 2 hands. I watched my words land, not as a rebuke, but as a series of brutal, undeniable truths. Jasmine's face crumpled. The tears that followed were a messy concoction of genuine guilt and sheer financial terror. "I'm sorry." "Mom, I'm so sorry I treated you that way," she sobbed, the words muffled against her hands. "But right now, you're the only person in the world I can turn to. If you have anything you can lend us, I swear on my life we will pay back every single dime." I moved to sit beside her, taking her trembling hands in my own. They felt so small, so cold, the same hands I'd held when she learned to walk. "Let me ask you something, Jasmine," I said, my voice barely a whisper. "If I really were a millionaire, if I truly were this Beaumont, what would you do? How would that change your life?" Her eyes, still swimming with tears, ignited with a frightening blend of relief and raw avarice. "It would mean we could save our house, our marriage, our future. It would mean I don't have to lie awake at night, paralyzed by the fear of losing everything." She paused, her gaze searching mine, and for a fleeting second, a shard of genuine insight broke through. "But it would also mean I've been the most wretched daughter in history, despising the one person who has always loved me." It was a good answer, a practiced perfect answer. But I knew my daughter. She was a virtuoso at playing the chords that made people dance to her tune. The real question remained. What would she do when the final curtain lifted? Would she love the mother she found, or only the fortune she represented? As quickly as the storm of tears had come, it passed. I watched her wipe her eyes with the back of her hand, a gesture that was more about erasing evidence than soothing pain. The vulnerability was being packed away, replaced by a cool, calculating focus. "Mom," she said, her voice now firm and direct, a lawyer approaching the bench. "I need a direct answer. Are you E.J. Beaumont or are you not?" I rose and walked to the window, looking down at the potholed street, the broken street lights, the world she was so desperate to escape. "Jasmine," I began, my back to her. "Imagine for a moment that the answer is yes. Imagine that all these years while you were ashamed of me, I was quietly building a multi-million-dollar empire." I turned slowly, pinning her with my gaze. "What do you think that revelation would say about you as a person?" Her face lost all its color. "It would mean I'm a monster," she whispered, the truth a bitter pill. "It would mean I despised the very person who sacrificed everything for me." But then, as if a circuit had been tripped in her mind, her eyes hardened. The guilt was being metabolized into something more useful, righteous indignation. "But it would also mean you lied to me for decades, that you let me strut around, feeling superior, when in reality, I was the one who had nothing." There she is, the real Jasmine. Instead of sitting with her shame, she was already expertly recasting herself as the wounded party. "So," I said, my voice calm and level, "you would prefer that I was truly poor, that your insults and humiliations were aimed at a woman who genuinely had no power, no defense? Would that make your actions more palatable?" She fell silent, trapped by the logic of her own cruelty. The silence stretched, thick and uncomfortable. Finally, in a small, defeated voice, she said, "I just want to understand why Mr. Sterling recognized you. I just want to know if there's any hope for us." It was time. The game was entering its most delicate phase. I walked to my bedroom and returned with an old worn shoebox. I placed it on the coffee table between us, a humble reliquary of manufactured truths. "There's something I've never shown you," I said, lifting the lid with deliberate slowness. Inside were aged documents, faded photos, and papers I had meticulously crafted for this very moment. I pulled out a 15-year-old photograph. It showed me, dressed in my humble cleaning clothes, standing outside an elegant glass and steel corporate tower. "A co-worker took this," I lied softly. "That day, I was cleaning the offices of Beaumont International Corporation." Jasmine's eyes snapped to the building's name, clearly visible in the grainy photo. "Beaumont," she murmured, taking the photo with reverent, trembling hands. "You worked for a Beaumont company." Her mind was a whirlwind, connecting the dots I had so carefully laid out. I then produced another document, a 12-year-old paycheck for cleaning services, where I had digitally altered the employer's name to read Beaumont Enterprises. "I worked for them for years," I said, pausing for a dramatic beat, "until I had to quit for personal reasons." "Personal reasons?" Her voice was a breathless whisper. "What kind of personal reasons would make you quit a stable job?" This was the precipice. I needed a story that was credible, compelling, and just vague enough to be unverifiable. "There were irregularities in the company," I said, sitting down heavily as if the memory was a physical weight. "Things I saw while cleaning offices at night. Conversations I overheard." I let my voice drop, feigning nervousness. "One day the CEO himself asked me to stay after hours for a private meeting." Jasmine's eyes widened, her imagination taking the reins. "He asked you to be a witness to something?" She breathed. "I can't talk about it," I said, shaking my head and looking away. "I signed a non-disclosure agreement. But let's just say there are powerful reasons why someone might want my identity to remain a secret." I began to put the documents back in the box, watching as Jasmine's hungry eyes followed every movement. "Mom," she said, her voice urgent with dawning realization, "are you telling me you know a secret about E.J. Beaumont? That you work directly for this person?" She leaned forward, her body taut with excitement. "Is that why Mr. Sterling recognized you? Because you were in those important meetings?" I didn't answer. I simply let my silence, my feigned anxiety, and the planted evidence build the narrative for her. I watched as she constructed her own theory, that I had been a silent witness to corporate crime, that the mysterious Beaumont had paid for my silence, that perhaps there was even a steady stream of hush money. "Do you have money from that time?" she asked, her voice dropping to a conspiratorial whisper. "Did they pay you for your silence?" Her eyes shone, not just with hope, but with something darker. The thrilling possibility that her mother was not a mogul, but a successful blackmailer. "Jasmine," I said firmly, closing the lid on the shoebox with a note of finality. "What happened during that time is complicated. There are powerful people involved, legal agreements I cannot break, and consequences that could destroy more lives than just our own." The truth was a fortress, but the lie I had just built for her was a labyrinth, and I had just watched my daughter walk willingly inside. I stood and moved to put the box away, a casual gesture belying the seismic shift in our dynamic. "But if you are truly in a financial crisis," I said, letting the words hang in the air, maybe there's something I can do." Jasmine shot up from the sofa as if electrified. "What kind of something?" Her voice was a strained, high-pitched wire of desperation. "Do you have access to money? Can you get a loan? Do you know someone who can help us?" I met her frantic gaze, my own steady and inscrutable. "I can make some calls. There are people who owe me favors from that time, but I would need to know exactly how much you need and what for." It was a deliberately vague promise, a hook baited with possibility, designed to keep her twisting in the wind while I plotted my next move. $600,000, she blurted out, the number a stark confession of their ruin. "We need $600,000 to pay off all the debts and start over." Her hands fluttered like wounded birds. "We could pay interest, give collateral, whatever is necessary." That is a considerable amount, I said, my tone thoughtful, as if mentally navigating a labyrinth of shadowy contacts. I would have to make very important calls, contact people who prefer to remain private. I paused, letting the silence amplify the gravity of my next words. And I would have to be sure that you understand the seriousness of what I'm willing to do for you. Jasmine nodded, a violent, jerky motion. We understand. We're serious. This isn't a whim, Mom, it's our life. But then, a new, sharper thought dawned in her eyes. She looked at me with dawning suspicion. But what would you have to do in return? What kind of favors would you have to call in? It was a shrewd question. She was finally realizing that salvation might come with a price tag more dangerous than death. That, I said, my voice dropping to a mysterious whisper, depends on how much you are willing to risk to save your future. And with those words, I left my daughter suspended in a state of agonizing anticipation, knowing she would spend the coming days imagining every possible scenario, from a miraculous bailout to a descent into a criminal underworld. For the next 3 days, my phone was a metronome of her anxiety. Her messages oscillated between desperate gratitude, "Thank you for even trying, Mom, you're my savior," and pure, unvarnished panic. "Did you make the calls? When will we know? Is it happening?" With each passing hour, her voice grew sharper, more frayed. I could hear the ghost of arguments with Devon in the background, the strain of a marriage buckling under the weight of a secret she couldn't fully share. On Friday night, I decided the hook had been set deep enough. It was time to reel her in. I called Jasmine. "I have news," I said, the words simple and heavy. "I need you and Devon to come to my apartment tomorrow night. 7 o'clock. And Jasmine," I paused, injecting a note of grave drama into my voice, "make sure no one else knows about this meeting, especially Devon's family." When they arrived on Saturday, the air was thick with unspoken questions. Jasmine was dressed in a severe black dress, as if for a high-stakes business negotiation. Devon, by contrast, was a portrait of nervous discomfort, constantly adjusting his tie and casting furtive, bewildered glances around my humble home. It was clear Jasmine had fed him a sanitized version of the truth, a carefully curated lie to secure his compliance. Before they could sit, I spoke, serving tea in my chipped ceramic mugs. "Before we begin, you need to understand something. The conversation we are about to have never leaves these four walls. There are powerful private people involved. Your financial future, and perhaps your safety, depends on your absolute discretion." Devon cleared his throat, his decency a stark contrast to the feverish gleam in his wife's eyes. "Miss Baines, Jasmine mentioned you might know people who could help us. We appreciate anything you can do, but we don't want to get you into any trouble." His genuine concern was almost painful to witness. "Devon," I said softly, "how much has Jasmine told you about my past work?" He glanced nervously at his wife. "She said you worked for an important company years ago and that you might know some influential people who could help secure a loan." A heavily edited version indeed. "It's more complicated than that," I said, rising to close the curtains. The theatrical gesture made them both tense. "For years, I didn't just clean the offices of one of the most powerful corporate entities in the country. My job was to observe, to listen, to report." Jasmine leaned forward, her breath catching. "Report what? To whom?" Her whisper was hushed, reverent, as if we were finally uttering a sacred incantation. Financial irregularities, private conversations, meetings that officially never happened. I paused, letting the implication coil around them. My direct supervisor wasn't the cleaning foreman. It was Beaumont herself. The silence that fell was absolute, a vacuum sucking all sound from the room. Devon blinked, struggling to connect the dots, but Jasmine turned as pale as marble, the pieces of her wild theory slamming into a terrifying perfect picture. "Are you saying you work directly for E.J. Beaumont?" Her voice cracked. "For more than 15 years, I confirmed, watching the tremor start in her hands. My official title was night cleaner." My real job was to be her eyes and ears in an industry drowning in corruption and fraud. It was a masterfully constructed lie, woven with just enough threads of truth to be unassailable. Devon, still adrift, asked innocently, "Miss Baines, are you saying you were like a private investigator?" "It was more than that," I said, my gaze locking with Jasmine's. I was about to give her the final damning piece of the puzzle. During all those years, E.J. Beaumont compensated me very generously for my discretion, and when I retired from that life, she ensured I had more than enough resources to live comfortably for the rest of my days. Jasmine practically launched herself from her seat, the last vestiges of her mask shattered. "How much?" The question was a blunt, greedy demand, stripped of all pretense. "How much money do you have?" The raw avarice in her eyes was a chilling sight. It was the moment of truce, not about my wealth but about her soul, and the revelation was more devastating than I had ever imagined. "Enough," I replied, my voice a placid lake, concealing unfathomable depths. "Enough to resolve your financial crisis several times over. But the question is not how much I have. The question is what you are willing to do to earn it." Devon shifted uncomfortably, his decency a stark contrast to the charged atmosphere. "Miss Baines, we don't want a handout. We're prepared to work, to pay interest, to offer collateral. We just need a bridge to get through this." But Jasmine was already in another realm, a place where courtesy was a currency she no longer had time for. "What would we have to do?" she demanded, her eyes burning with a terrifying blend of desperation and a dark, burgeoning resolve. "What do you want in exchange?" It was time for the final examination. For weeks I had woven a tapestry of doubt and mystery. Now I would see the true fabric of my daughter's character. "Jasmine," I began, my words slow and deliberate, each one a carefully placed weight. "For years you have treated me as a ghost. You have insulted me, humiliated me, scorned me in public. At your own wedding you branded me a fat sob before 200 witnesses. I watched the memory slap her, a faint flush rising on her neck. "And yet now that you sent money on the wind, I have suddenly become the most cherished mother in the world." Her cheeks flamed. "Mom, I've told you I'm sorry. If I could take it all back, I would. Please don't let my past mistakes destroy our future." "Our future," I repeated, a single skeptical eyebrow arched. "Or your financial future. The distinction, my dear, is everything." Devon tried to intervene, a peacemaker in a war he didn't understand. "Miss Baines, I know Jasmine hasn't always been present, but the stress has been unimaginable. It changes a person." "Devon," I said gently, "your loyalty is commendable but misguided. This began long before your debts. If I am to open these particular doors for you, I require ironclad guarantees that my generosity will not be squandered or misunderstood." Jasmine leaned forward, her body a taut wire. "What guarantees?" "We'll do anything. We'll sign anything. Just name the condition." Her blind acquiescence, her refusal to even ask for details, was the most damning testimony of all. "Very well," I said, rising and moving to the desk where a single plain folder lay. "I have prepared a proposal that could erase your troubles. But before you see it," I paused, my hand resting on the cover, "I need to know if you are prepared for the permanent alteration of our relationship." "What kind of alteration?" Devon asked, his voice laced with a new profound caution. But Jasmine was already nodding, a frantic, jerky motion. "Yes, whatever it is. The kind," I said, my voice dropping to a near whisper as I carried the folder back, "that will reveal, once and for all, whether you value family over fortune, or if fortune is the only key that unlocks your love." I placed the folder on the coffee table between us. The sound was a dull, final thud. I opened it slowly, revealing the documents I had crafted with the precision of a master forger. The top page was a masterpiece of legalistic intimidation, covered in official-looking stamps and florid signatures. The heading, in bold black letters, read, "Conditional Financial Transfer Agreement." "This," I said, sliding the document toward them, "is the proposal I have been negotiating with my associates." Jasmine snatched the paper, her eyes devouring the text. Devon read over her shoulder, his face gradually draining of color. The terms were designed to be a mirror, reflecting back the very soul of anyone who read them. First condition, Jasmine read aloud, her voice trembling. Complete transfer of all titled assets, primary residence, vehicles, investment properties, into the benefactor's name as collateral. She looked up, her eyes wide. You'd own everything we have. Temporarily, I clarified, my gaze fixed on them. A safeguard until you demonstrate the fiscal responsibility such a sum demands. It's standard in these private arrangements. Devon found his voice, though it was strained. Miss Baines, that would make us utterly dependent on you. We'd have no security. What happens if you change your mind? Second condition, Jasmine continued, her voice gaining a frantic momentum as she ignored him. Immediate and permanent relocation to a designated city under a 5-year probationary period involving strictly regulated familial contact. The silence that fell was thick enough to choke on. Devon went pale. Strictly regulated contact, he echoed, horror dawning in his eyes. What does that mean? It means, I said, my tone unnervingly calm, that for 5 years you would live where I choose, in a home I provide, on an allowance I determine. Visits would be scheduled and supervised. All communication with me would be conducted through appointed intermediaries. Jasmine was already frantically scanning down the page, her finger tracing the lines, searching for the bottom line, the number, the escape hatch. The conditions were merely obstacles to be overcome. The fate of our relationship, the price of her dignity, was nothing more than fine print. Third condition, Jasmine read, her voice fracturing on the words. Voluntary renunciation of all future inheritance rights. She looked up, her face a mask of stunned comprehension. You're saying if we take this money, we give up any claim to anything you might leave behind, forever. Exactly, I confirmed, my voice cool and detached. This would be your one and only financial benefit from our relationship. After this, you are on your own, and I am free of any future obligation. Devon shot up from the sofa as if propelled by a spring, his face flushed with a righteous, horrified anger. Miss Baines, with all due respect, this isn't a loan. This isn't family help. This is you purchasing our freedom. His voice trembled, not with fear, but with moral outrage. You're offering us a fortune in exchange for severing the very ties that make us a family. But Jasmine's eyes remained locked on the document, her mind a whirlwind of calculations. How much would the monthly stipend be? She asked, her tone shockingly pragmatic, utterly ignoring her husband's anguish. And what kind of house would we get? The chasm between them was now a gaping void. Devon saw the proposal for the cruel, surgical instrument it was. Jasmine saw only the lifeline. The stipend would be $4,000 a month, I replied, watching the number ignite a greedy flame in her eyes. The house would be modest but comfortable, in a small city with a low cost of living. You could live without fear, but not without memory. Jasmine, Devon turned to her, his voice thick with disbelief. Are you actually considering this? Discussing an allowance in exchange for exiling yourself from your own mother. He ran a hand through his hair, the picture of a man watching his world dissolve. This is not right. This entire situation is poisoned. Jasmine finally tore her gaze from the paper. Devon, we are about to lose everything. The house, the cars, our standing, it's all gone. My mother is offering us a way out. Her eyes shone with a desperation that was both heartbreaking and repulsive. 5 years isn't forever. We could take the money, start fresh in a new city, build a new life. Build what? Devon's question was a raw, pained whisper. A life founded on a transaction that sold your last connection to your mother? Our future children would have a grandmother who is a stranger, a secret, a paid-off debt. I moved to the window, giving them the illusion of privacy, though I hung on every shattered word. This was the crucible. This was the moment their true metal would be revealed. Devon, Jasmine's voice softened into a plea. My relationship with my mother is already in ruins. A week ago, I called her a fat SA in front of everyone we know. For years before that, I treated her like she was nothing. Maybe this is the price. Maybe this is what I deserve. Don't say that, he exclaimed. Mistakes can be atoned for. Families can be mended. But what she's proposing isn't healing, Jasmine. It's an amputation. He turned to me, his eyes blazing with a clarity that cut through all my carefully constructed layers. Miss Baines, I understand that my wife has hurt you deeply. But this isn't justice. It's vengeance. His words landed like a physical blow. He had named the ugly hidden engine of my entire scheme. The part of me that wanted to make her pay, not just test her. Devon, I said softly, turning from the window. What do you suggest then? That I simply hand over the money? That I allow myself to be treated as a bank, now that she's discovered I might be one? I suggest, he said, his voice firm with a conviction that humbled me, that we find a way to heal the relationship between you and your daughter without a single dollar changing hands. I suggest Jasmine earn your forgiveness through time, through action, through genuine remorse, not through a signed contract. Jasmine stood abruptly, the document crumpling in her white-knuckled grip. That's easy for you to say. You're not the one facing total ruin. Tears of frustration streamed down her face. You don't know what it's like to live with the shame of having publicly destroyed the only person who ever truly loved you. Her voice broke. At least with this agreement, there's a path. We could start over. We could build something real. Build what? Devon begged, his own composure crumbling. A life purchased with the corpse of your family. He looked at me, a final desperate appeal in his eyes. Miss Baines, you have been shrewd and successful your entire life. Surely you can see that this path leads to a hollow victory. It won't bring you peace. It will only entomb you both in your bitterness. It was the pivotal moment, the crossroads I had engineered but now feared to walk down. I could let the charade play out, let Jasmine sign her family away, and claim my hollow, vengeful triumph. Or I could do the one thing I had not allowed myself to do for 30 years. Be completely, terrifyingly honest. There is a fourth condition, I said finally, my voice cutting through their emotional turmoil. One that is not written in the document. They both stared at me, frozen in anticipation. Before you sign anything, I continued, before you make a decision that will haunt you forever, I need to tell you the whole truth about who I am. Jasmine let the papers slip from her fingers, fluttering to the table like dead leaves. What truth? She whispered, a dawning horror in her eyes, as if she finally sensed the unimaginable scale of the game she had been playing. What more could there be? The truth, I said, walking to my desk and pulling out a different, simpler folder, is that I don't need contacts to get that money. The truth is, that document is a complete fabrication, a test I designed to force this very conversation. I held up the new folder, and the truth is, Jasmine, I am exactly who Mr. Sterling believed me to be. The silence that followed was absolute, a void into which all the air and sound of the room vanished. They stared at me as if I had just peeled my face away to reveal another beneath. For the last 30 years, I continued, opening the real folder to reveal bank statements, corporate ownership records, and a single, damning photo of me at the head of a conference table. While you saw a cleaning woman, I was building an empire. I am not a former spy or a blackmailer. I am Eleanor Baines, and I am E.J. Beaumont. I have built a business empire, valued at over $200 million, I said, the words simple, stark, and final. And all this time, you have been living less than 3 miles from one of the wealthiest women in the country. The folder I opened now contained not forgeries, but truths. Real bank statements bearing my full legal name, corporate certificates of ownership, acquisition contracts for Sterling Corporation, signed with my own unmistakable signature, photographs from board meetings where I sat at the head of the table, identified as E.J. Beaumont. Jasmine picked up the first document, her hands trembling so violently the paper rattled. Checking account. Eleanor Baines. Beaumont, she read aloud, her voice a ghost of a sound. Current balance. The numbers were so staggering the paper slipped from her fingers as if it had burned her. This is real. Devon leaned over, his face bleached of all color. Miss Baines, I mean Miss Beaumont. He corrected himself, the title a reverent whisper. You really are. I am exactly who Mr. Sterling recognized, I confirmed, laying more evidence upon the coffee table like a prosecutor delivering a final, irrefutable argument. These are the purchase contracts for his company. This is my signature. These are the wire transfers for $45 million. Each document was a demolition charge, collapsing the fragile reality they had inhabited. Jasmine collapsed onto the sofa, her eyes darting wildly, unable to settle on any one piece of the shattered truth. But you live here, in this apartment. You wear thrift store clothes. You take the bus. Her voice cracked under the strain of cognitive dissonance. Why? Why live like this if you have all of that? It was the question that had haunted my every silent moment. Because, I said, sitting across from her, my own composure a hard-won fortress, after your father died, I made a vow to never be vulnerable again. I swore I would build a fortress so impregnable that no one, not fate, not misfortune, not even my own daughter, could ever harm me financially. I let the starkness of that admission hang between us. But I also vowed to live simply, so I would never forget what truly matters in a life. Something I fear we have all lost sight of. Devon was still poring over the documents, his expression one of dawning, awestruck horror. Miss Beaumont, these companies. I know these companies. You own the farm-to-table chain that saved my cousin's business. You're the anonymous buyer of the manufacturing plant where my aunt works. His voice filled with a new, humbled respect. You've been saving jobs all over this state for years. Not just this state, I said softly. In 12 countries. I find companies drowning in their own failures and I give them a lifeline. I employ over 50,000 people, Devon. People with families, with dreams, with bills to pay. It was the first time I had spoken my real work aloud to family, and the confession felt like a long-held breath finally released. Jasmine finally looked up from the damning evidence of my success, tears carving clean paths through her makeup. 30 years, she murmured, the number a lifetime sentence. For 30 years I've watched you scrub floors. I've despised your simplicity. I've treated you like you were. Nothing. Her voice shattered completely. And all this time, you were more powerful, more significant than anyone I have ever known. More successful, perhaps, I corrected gently, the most painful truth yet to come. But apparently, a catastrophic failure as a mother. The words hung in the air, sharp and bleeding. Devon sat down heavily, burying his face in his hands. Oh God, Miss Beaumont, he groaned, the memory clearly torturing him. When I think of the things Jasmine said, the excuses we made to exclude you, we pitied you, we thought you were a millstone around her neck. You didn't judge me, I stated firmly. I crafted this image. I chose this invisibility. What you saw was the character I designed. I pulled one final document from the folder, but that also means that every cruel word, every dismissive glance, every moment I was treated as less than human, that was a choice Jasmine made, all on her own. A raw, guttural sob was torn from Jasmine's throat. She doubled over as if in physical pain. I'm sorry, she choked out, the words barely intelligible. I'm so sorry. There are no words. There's no way to ever undo what I've done. You are right, I said, my voice calm but not unkind. There is no undoing it, but there is a path forward. I stood and retrieved one last folder from my desk. This is my real will, Jasmine. Would you like to know what it says? Her eyes widened in pure terror. Mom, no. It doesn't matter. I deserve to be disinherited. I deserve to be cut out of your life completely. It says, I continued, overriding her protest, that upon my death, 70% of my fortune was to be distributed to the charitable foundations I have secretly funded for decades. Women's shelters, literacy programs, scholarships for the children of janitors and factory workers. I paused, letting the magnitude of that legacy sink in. The remaining 30% was always intended for you and for your future children. Devon caught it immediately. Was, he said, his voice heavy with understanding. Was, I confirmed, my gaze locking with my daughter's. After the wedding, I drafted a new will. Now, 100% goes to charity. I watched the realization dawn in her streaming eyes, not of loss, but of understanding, because I realized that leaving you a single dime would only validate the very sickness I was trying to cure, the belief that money is more important than love. Jasmine stood up, swaying on her feet as if the ground had fallen away beneath her. "It's okay," she whispered, the words of surrender and an acceptance. "It's more than okay. You have every right, but please," her voice shattered, "please don't cut me out of your life while you're still in it. I don't care about the money anymore. I just want a chance to be a real daughter to you." "A real daughter?" I repeated, the words tasting like ash, like the one who introduced me as a fat essay 2 weeks ago. Devon moved to her side, a steady anchor in her storm of grief. "Miss Beaumont," he said, his voice firm, yet layered with a newfound reverence. "I understand your pain. There are no excuses for what Jasmine has done, but she is your daughter and you are her mother. There has to be a path back from this. Isn't there? Is there?" I asked, the question genuine, born from a well of decades-deep exhaustion. How do you heal a relationship when one person has spent a lifetime teaching you that their affection has a price tag? Jasmine pulled away from Devon and came towards me, her pride dissolving as she fell to her knees before my worn armchair. "Mom, I know I have no right to ask for anything. I know I've been a monster, but if you give me one chance, just one, I will spend every day for the rest of my life proving to you who I can be." "And your debts?" I asked, the final practical test. "Do you still expect me to make them vanish?" Jasmine and Devon exchanged a long, silent look, a conversation held in the space of a heartbeat. Finally, Devon spoke, his voice clear and resolved. "Miss Beaumont, we will solve our own problems. We'll sell everything. We'll move to a small apartment. We'll work any job we can find. We don't want your money." "He's right," Jasmine said, and in her eyes I saw the first flicker of the person she might have been. "It's not about the money anymore, Mom. It's about whether you can ever find a way to forgive me." This was the moment I had fantasized about for years. Yet, standing at its precipice, I felt not triumph, but a profound, soul-deep weariness. "Jasmine," I said softly, helping her to her feet, "forgiveness isn't a prize you win in a single conversation. It's a bridge you build, brick by painful brick, over a very long time." "Then tell me how to lay the first brick," she pleaded, her hands trembling in mine. "You start," I said, my voice gaining a steely edge, "by publicly admitting what you did. You start by apologizing by name to every person who witnessed your cruelty at that wedding. And you start by treating me with the respect I have always deserved, not because of my bank account, but because I am your mother." "I will," she vowed, her nod violent with conviction. "I will do all of that and more." "And I said, gathering the documents that held the truth of my double life, "need time. Time to decide if I believe this change is real or just your most masterful performance yet." The deeper truth was, after 30 years behind a mask, I was no longer sure who I was without it. Was I Eleanor, the invisible woman, or Beaumont, the Empress of Shadow? Until I knew, I could not know what kind of mother or grandmother I could possibly be. 6 months later, I stood before the floor-to-ceiling windows of my new penthouse. The glittering skyline of Charlotte sprawled beneath me. The woman reflected in the glass was a stranger I was only just beginning to know. Her hair was expertly styled. Her clothing was understated luxury. Her posture that of a CEO. For the first time in 3 decades, Eleanor Baines and E.J. Beaumont occupied the same skin. The unification was more disorienting than I had anticipated. My armor of fake poverty was gone, leaving me exposed to a new world of expectations. But Jasmine had begun her work, and it was more powerful than any corporate takeover. 1 week after our confrontation, she orchestrated a dinner, reassembling the 200 guests from her wedding. In the same ballroom where she had shattered me, she stood, a single trembling figure, and read a handwritten apology. 6 months ago, she began, her voice clear but thick with emotion, I stood in this very room and publicly humiliated the most important woman in my life. I called my mother a fat say and laughed while her heart broke in front of you. A collective shameful silence fell over the room. What you didn't know, what I didn't know, is that my mother is one of the most formidable and successful business leaders in this country. But that is not what makes my behavior monstrous. What makes it unforgivable is that she is my mother, and I chose cruelty over love. She cried through every word, but she did not stop. Mr. Sterling, his own face streaked with tears, stood and offered his own profound apology. The air in the room shifted from one of judgment to one of collective, humbled awe. The public penance was only the beginning. Jasmine and Devin sold their mansion and luxury cars, liquidating the life they could no longer afford. They moved into a modest 2-bedroom apartment, and they took jobs that demanded humility, Jasmine as a clinic receptionist, Devin as a junior accountant. When I tentatively offered to clear their remaining debts, Devin gently but firmly refused. Miss Beaumont, he said, we need to prove to ourselves and to you that we can stand on our own, that we are more than our balance sheet. The most profound moment came when Jasmine visited my corporate headquarters for the first time. She stood in the soaring 40-story atrium, her head tilted back to take in the scale of my empire. She didn't ask for a single thing for herself. Instead, she turned to me, her eyes not full of greed, but of a hungry, desperate curiosity. Show me, she whispered, her voice full of awe. Show me how you built all of this. I don't want your money, Mom. I want to understand the woman I never took the time to see. I want to learn to create my own. And so began the most unexpected chapter of all, mentoring my 34-year-old daughter in the fundamentals of a life I had deliberately hidden from her. Our weekly lunches, which started as fragile truces in anonymous cafes, slowly evolved into something real. It was during these meetings that Jasmine asked the questions that both broke and mended my heart. How did you know which risks were worth taking? She'd ask, her notebook open. How do you separate your heart from a business decision? How did you find the strength to wait years for a seed to grow into a forest? What struck me most was the painful realization that her materialism wasn't entirely her fault. I had been so consumed with building my secret fortress that I had left her financial and emotional education to the wolves of a shallow world. Her cruelty was, in part, a symptom of an upbringing where money was a mysterious, fickle god, not a tool built by discipline and wisdom. The true turning point came 4 months into our fragile new beginning. Jasmine arrived at our lunch with a light in her eyes I hadn't seen since she was a small child, a genuine, unforced pride. Mom, she said, her smile effortless and true. This month, Devin and I paid all our bills without a single credit card. It's the first time in my adult life that's happened. It was a modest victory by any external measure, but for her, it was a revolution. And, she continued, her voice dropping to a thrilled whisper, we have something else to tell you. Devin, who had become a steady, warm presence in my life, took her hand. We're expecting a baby. The news washed over me, a tidal wave of pure, unadulterated joy. A grandmother. After decades of steeling myself for a solitary future, the prospect of a family, a real, messy, loving family, bloomed inside me. And what are your plans? I managed to ask, my voice thick with emotion. We want to raise her differently, Jasmine said without hesitation. She will know her grandmother from her first breath. She will understand that value isn't a price tag, and that family is the one currency that never devalues. In that moment, the last of my walls crumbled. I reached into my purse and pulled out a document I had been carrying for weeks. There's something I need to tell you both, I said. I've been thinking a great deal about the future. About my legacy. Jasmine tensed. Mom, we've told you we don't want... It's not about an inheritance, I interrupted gently. It's about a purpose. I placed the document on the table. This is the charter for the Baines Sterling Family Foundation. I am converting half of my fortune into a charitable foundation that will be stewarded by our family for generations to come. Devon studied the document, his accountant's mind whirring. What does that mean exactly? It means, I explained, my heart full, that when your daughter is grown, she won't be handed wealth. She'll be entrusted with a mission. She will learn financial responsibility by managing resources that heal and uplift. It means Jasmine can build a meaningful career in philanthropy. It means none of you will be idle heirs, but you will always have the power to be architects of change. Jasmine began to cry. But these were tears of healing, not despair. It's perfect, she whispered. It's purpose without privilege, opportunity without emptiness. In the months that followed, we built the foundation together. Jasmine discovered a natural gift for seeing the heart of a community's needs, while Devon provided the structural integrity with his sharp financial mind. For the first time in 30 years, I had a family. It was imperfect, scarred, and real. The day my granddaughter, Aliyah Beaumont Sterling, was born, I cradled her tiny perfect form in my arms and made a silent vow. She would know every part of me, Eleanor, the woman of simple tastes, and E.J., the builder of empires, from the very start. There would be no shadows, no disguises, no shame in either strength or humility. Now when I look back on that devastating night at the wedding, I see it not as an ending but as a brutal, necessary genesis. Jasmine had to lose everything to understand what was truly valuable. I had to risk my secret to discover what was truly worth keeping. The question I leave you with, as I look toward a future brighter than I ever dared to imagine, is this. In your own life, in your own family, have you found the courage to be fully, authentically you? Or are you still hiding parts of yourself behind walls of fear, protection, or pride? The painful, beautiful truth I learned is this. There can be no real love where there are fundamental secrets. And in the end, it is love, not money, not power, not pride, that is the true, unshakable foundation upon which everything else is built. A note from the author. Did you find a piece of your own story within Ellie's journey? I would be honored to know which part resonated with you and which city you're listening from. Let's connect in the comments below. If this story moved you, your support through a super thanks helps me continue to bring these heartfelt narratives to life. Your engagement is the fuel for this channel. There are more life stories waiting for you on the screen. So much more awaits on my channel. Don't forget to subscribe. Until the next story, I send you all my love and respect.